Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and we'll see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where it's a Friday the 13th today, isn't it? I didn't even notice. I was just looking at the date today when I thought about it, and I was like, whoa. You know, Friday the 13th is definitely one of those things where when you're growing up, you think it's going to be a big deal when it is. You know, also things like being on fire and quicksand. I'm not to say that people haven't, faced these haven't faced issues with them in the first place, although I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what sort of Friday 13th issues you face, which is necessarily due to the day, I guess, apart from superstition, but who knows. I mean, maybe in some cosmic sense, Friday the 13th is actually unlucky, but I would imagine that most of it lies in to do with human psychology rather than actual sort of inherent, I don't know, date-based influences in the world. Anyway, hello everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, 6:08 PM on Friday, January 13, 2023. And to be fair, there are some things which, when you are growing up, are made to be a bigger deal than not a bigger deal, because they are important, because if they do happen, you definitely don't want to, have a wrong response. Like, obviously, being on fire is pretty bad, but children are panicky. Well, but humans in general are quite panicky. And, you kind of want to sort of build in the instinct. If you don't know, and at least in the UK, there's so many things. And when I was younger, being like, oh, what do you do when you're on fire? I remember big posters about it as well, just being stop, drop, and roll. It's I assume it's some sort of promotion by, I don't know, maybe a fire brigade or something. And then we even had sessions where firefighters came in and we had to practice stop, dropping, and rolling. Of course, when you're a kid, it's all good fun. You're like, oh, I'm on fire. And then when you're older, you're like, whoa, actually burning really sucks. I've never been. The worst burn I've been subjected to is just an accidental lighter burn, which is also, you're not allowed to move Phoebe. It was completely my own accident. It's basically I was just playing around with my uncle's lighter, and using he was like, don't do that, you're gonna burn yourself. And then I opened it wrong way and I burnt my thumb. And he was just like, well. And yeah, that kind of hurt, to be honest, and I'm not going to lie. I ran out under cold water almost immediately, but still kind of hurts, that's not, burning is a pretty painful sensation. So, even though, but when you're a kid, obviously the severity of what you're doing doesn't really sort of sink in, I suppose. But it's very sort of ingrained into you. Stop, drop, and roll. On fire, stop, drop, and roll. So much so that I remember other kids getting it mixed up with other things, being that's what you're just meant to do in any emergency, which I will say the efficacy of that in certain emergencies, I'd imagine, sort of varies quite a lot compared to just being on fire. But realistically, you don't catch on fire very often, is probably what I'd say. I've never caught on fire. I don't know anyone who's been on fire. It's kind of a thing more if it happens, you want to have the right reaction to it, because maybe 1 in 1,000 people will in their lifetime will have a point where they need to stop, drop, and roll, their clothing has caught on fire or something. That the consequences for not knowing stop, drop, and roll is catastrophic, I suppose. That is literally just probably imminent deceasement, if one way to put it, and a very painful one at that, I'd imagine, and possibly causing even more damage depending on how the fire even spreads in the first place. But, the price, I suppose, is multiple lessons, I suppose, when you're younger, just sort of emphasising the fact that if you're on fire, you've got to stop, drop, and roll. Which, there probably is an argument to be made that this sort of reinforcement should be definitely done on other things as well. But there's certainly a thing don't talk to strangers, I remember. And there was something that was very much puppeted in our school, where it's don't talk to strangers. If a stranger comes to approach you and wants you to go somewhere, just don't say no. And if they keep insisting, you're meant to run away and scream. Which, of course, at the time when I'm younger, I was just that sounds quite funny, and I'm not sure if I'm going to want to do that. I don't want to, make a commotion. And now I'm older, I'm just whoa, please do make a commotion, kid. Do not get, taken by a random stranger. I suppose, again, the gravity of a situation doesn't really sink in until you're older. At least on me, personally. I don't know about you, maybe you're a very aware kid. I was just whatever. Which is, it's thankful, I suppose, I made it to this adult age, hey? But yeah, it's basically the things that popped in, multiple times in school. Pretty important that you got to know off the top of your head. You want your kid to find themselves in that situation and know what to do, as an instinct, even if they don't understand the severity of it. You want them to have that reaction, right? But I will say, Quicksand, I don't know if we needed to have such a big deal about quicksand. Now, I'm not going to say for schooling, like, we didn't have, like, lessons like we did with, like, a fire brigade and, like, the police or whatever about, like, quicksand or anything. We don't have, like, an emergency quicksand department. But I'm just saying, like, in books, quicksand and Quicksand and Friday the 13th seem like a way bigger deal than we're going to be. You know, Friday the 13th, step on a crack, break your mother's back. Doesn't happen. At the worst, you've just stepped on a crack and maybe, I don't know, you've killed a few plants which are trying to grow up through that, like, concrete little opening. But, oh well, I suppose. Life happens. You know, walk onto a ladder. I mean, that was just, like, sort of good advice not to do in the first place. Like, if you get the choice not to walk under a ladder, you probably shouldn't. Especially if someone's on the ladder. I mean, you might get, like, a bucket of paint on your head if you're, like, in a 90s cartoon or something. But, you know, you also might just, like, knock a person off. You know, if there's a ladder, there's likely to be things up high, and you don't really want them falling on your head, do you? Anyway, it shouldn't be restricted to just ladders, I'm sure. Like, anything which is high up, you know, just be aware of your surroundings and look upwards, I suppose, is a lesson learned. Black cats, I don't know why black cats necessarily had to become unlucky. I suppose it's due to association with witches or whatnot. I don't know why witches necessarily have an association with black cats either. I think black cats are pretty cute. Well, I think most cats are pretty cute, so I guess that's not really much of a surprise. If I adopt a cat, I'm going to make sure it's a black cat, just, you know, for that. Not even for the aesthetic, but, you know, they've been maligned for far too long. Let them have a time in the spotlight, or the shadow light. Or a spot shadow, I guess, is the inversion of a spotlight. What other ones are there? Breaking a mirror? I don't know why that one's particularly unlucky either. I mean, it kind of sucks. Like, you know, mirrors are like, I mean, when they've got, like, glass and sharp objects in them in the first place, you kind of don't want to break them. What other sort of unlucky things are there? I don't really know. Anyway, not a big deal, you know. And that's depending on how much you believe in. It's not even karma, I suppose, because you're not really doing anything. It's not like you're breaking a mirror and being like, oh, you know, that's like, it's 7 years bad luck, supposedly, if you break a mirror, but it's not, that doesn't really feel like karmic retribution. I feel it's a bit disproportionate, being like, oh, okay, you know, I broke a household object, 7 years bad luck, and be like, oh, what's next? I'm going to sit down and my chair leg breaks, and now you're going to be cursed for the next 20 years of your life. That seems like, it's very disproportional, isn't it? So it's not even karma, it's just straight up superstition, I suppose, in the first place, isn't it? Which, I don't know. I mean, maybe you are superstitious, in which case, obviously me being like, oh, it doesn't exist, is not going to do anything for you. You're still likely to believe in it. You know, people are quite ingrained in the sort of opinions they have, right? And it takes a lot of convincing to get someone to feel comfortable outside of it. You know, it's just how we are as human beings, I suppose. For good or for worse, we are all quite stubborn to a certain degree. But yeah. I don't know, it just feels like Friday the 13th was always such a big deal when you were younger, you know, but, you know, nowadays it's just like, literally, it's just like today when you're in adulthood. I mean, I shouldn't say I'm in adulthood, I'm in young adulthood, I suppose, so like, oh, yeah, today's Friday the 13th, isn't it? Whoa, spooky. So much so, I suppose, that you can make, like, a cheesy slasher fake out of it, not slasher fake, slasher movie out of it in the first place, which, you know, I guess that's how little seriousness goes into it, I suppose, in first place. And of course, there's always a fun joke of like, oh, imagine if Friday the 13th lands on Halloween this year. And I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. But Quicksand especially, like, I don't think anything gets not emphasised as much more, but like, I suppose with media. Unless your school trained you to survive a quicksand, in which case I must be like, what school did you go to? You were taught like by Bear Grylls or something. What's happened? But like, the amount of times quicksand appears in like media properties and being like, oh no, it's a danger, or whatever have you. Someone's sinking in quicksand. Oh no, you know, it's a book, like, I can't remember what book it is, but there's like this, when I was younger, there's like this survival book of like, it was something called like, the survival, 100 things which boys need to know about surviving the outdoors or whatever. I read it anyway. Whoa, check me out. Well, actually I didn't read it. What I did is I read the first 20 pages in the W.H. Smith and then I didn't buy the book, and I probably went to go read something else. But I remember one thing being like, how to survive quicksand or whatever, and it's like, don't panic, don't struggle. You had to like lie on your back or something, get a stick, try and prop it underneath you, and like use it as a float to get to the other side, or someone to pull you out. But in reality, as I understand it, I've never personally experienced quicksand or seen quicksand. Apparently quicksand's like, you know, because human beings are quicksand is too dense for you to properly sink into. Reason you sink in water, of course, is the fact that, well, I mean, human beings can float and also can sink in water. I think it depends on, like, you know, if you've got like air in your lungs or not, have a memory or something. So, but you know, to do a buoyancy is basically, you know, the long short bit is like, it's not, are you heavier than water? What is it? Are you heavier than water? Maybe it is. I'm not a physicist, so I don't remember the exact whatchamacallit. well, physics, I suppose, behind it. Apparently I've not been speaking to Vivian enough, but it's like, you can float in water and thing, but because like quicksand is super dense or whatever, as I understand, it's just like liquefacted, is that word, sand or whatever. I'm not really sure necessarily what quicksand is, whatever, but most of the time you're just floating. If you go to quicksand, you basically like sink up to your waist. Scary, certainly, but then it's like almost impossible to sink any further, just because like human beings, like I said, too buoyant, we just won't sink in it. So really, unless you I guess dive headfirst into quicksand, you're probably okay, all things considered. I mean, it's a nuisance, don't get me wrong, like, you know, I mean, it's probably like a very still thick and viscous liquid to try and even kind of wade through, so I don't think it's particularly something you want to get stuck in, but if you somehow find yourself in quicksand, you'll probably be okay, more or less. But it's weird how like treated it is as like an actual danger. I feel like I have this memory of, is it a Famous Five? Maybe in the Famous Five novel, like the guy, I can't remember, the eldest like son or whatever, I can't remember, like the eldest brother or whatever, like gets stuck in quicksand and it's like, oh, help. And I don't really remember the story. It's something like that, you know. And they had to pull him out with a big stick and it was all like tense. You know, Enid Blyton spreading lies. Well, actually, I might be spreading lies. It might not have been a Famous Five novel. Is it Famous Five or Famous Four? No, it's Famous Five. Yeah, I think so. That sounds right to me, so I'm going to stick with it at the very least. But yeah, anyway, I'm not going to say quicksand's harmless, because it's not like you can eat it, and it's not like, oh, it's actually just like water or something, you know. If you swallow quicksand, it's probably not great for you, you know, it's just swallowing like really thick sand, I guess. And also, you can still suffocate in it. I'm not just saying just like, don't, you know, it's... basically, don't invert yourself to the other side where it's like, oh, quicksand is such a danger to, oh, quicksand is like a joke. You know, quicksand can still probably, you know, end your life if you're not careful around it, I'd imagine. But, you know, just like, it's not that big a deal. You can sort of like get out of it pretty easily, I'd imagine. This is where we Google quicksand and see, or whatever. Is a colloid? Is a mixture in which one substance consisting of microscopically dispersed, oh gosh, I accidentally just pushed OBS on my screen. Insoluble particles are suspended for another substance. Okay, it's basically a solid in liquid, basically. Well, okay, it has to be another substance. I guess it can be a gas, aerosols, okay, whatever. For our purposes, it's solids in a liquid. Of fine granular materials such as sand and silt, or clay and water. When water and the sand cannot escape, it creates liquefied soil that loses strength and cannot support weight. Quicksand can form in standing water and upflowing water. Let's see. In popular culture, here we go. Quicksand is a trope of adventure fiction, particularly in film, where it's typically and unrealistically depicted as a suction effect that causes people or animals that walk into it to sink until fully submerged and risk drowning. This has led to a common misconception that human beings can be completely immersed and drown in quicksand. However, this is physically impossible. The gimmick had its heyday in the 1960s, where almost 3% of all films showed characters sinking in clay, mud, or sand. 3% of all films in the 1960s. That's really high for such a niche thing. Can you believe it? 3% of all films. Imagine all the films being created. How many of them have absolutely no relevance to like adventure, you know, esque genre in the first place? And then quicksand is still something you sink in. And I'm not saying there's not things you can sink in. Like, by the way, you know, you might look at quicksand and be like, well, you know, that means like anything's no big deal if you float in it. No, not necessarily. I've heard about like grain silos are actually super deadly. But if you find yourself in a grain silo and you sink, you're basically done for, because there's basically no way you can get back up or something. So I'd be careful, I suppose. I mean, I feel like, I'm going to be honest, I feel like if you work with a grain silo, you probably know that, you know. Like all the farmers out there who are grain silos are like, yeah, I know about that, tell me about it. That's why I wear a harness before going into like a grain silo or something like that. And then like if you don't know about it, you're probably like never going to interact with a grain silo in your life. At least, hopefully not unsupervised. Which, if anything, it makes that scene from a quiet place even spookier, you know. Those kids are in real danger. And the fact that, you know, one of them pulled the other one up, I suppose spoilers for a Quiet Place, one of them pulled the other one up just like through raw like strength alone is quite unrealistic. As is, you know, the whole alien invasion part, I suppose. Yeah, well, so far, you know, let's not rule it out of 2023. Maybe aliens will invade. And hopefully they're nice aliens. But yeah, quicksand. There's a quicksand warning sign here, so really, maybe it is a little bit dangerous. It strikes me as something which is not necessarily dangerous, but is, you know, like a real inconvenience. Like, just like the same way you might get warning, like, watch out, there might be, like, falling rocks here. I mean, you get both falling rocks and falling boulder. Falling boulder is definitely something to be worried about. Falling rocks is generally just, like, kind of, like, annoyance. It's kind of like hard hail. Well, I guess hail is already quite hard, isn't it? Maybe that's not a good example. Maybe, like, oh, slippy ice. Slippy walkways or whatever, and you know, if you slip, unless you're like super old, and then you'll probably be fine. It would just probably hurt, right? You just got to be a bit careful around it, you know. Anyway, what I'm just saying is quicksand is far too was far too overrepresented in media. I think nowadays it's not really much anymore. I can't really think of the last time I saw quicksand. It just sort of makes me think of, like, you know, I don't know. I think of like Hanna-Barbera cartoons. I think of like Indiana Jones. I was like, I can't remember his name in the slightest. I don't know. There we go. And I've only seen like one Indiana Jones movie, so I don't know if it's really that prolific inside of it. Actually, now I think about it, I think I appeared in My Little Pony as well, in one of the Equestria Girls movies. And I have some distinct memory of like one of the characters sinking in quicksand. I don't know if I just made that up or not. I don't know. I guess it's so tropey now that it's sort of like done as a thing to laugh at. In the first place, being like, ha ha ha, you can't actually sink in quicksand. Anyway, grain entrapment. Here's the actual thing I was talking about, like silo and grains. As if you're in a silo and like the grain starts like draining out of it, you actually get like super stuck. There's actually a lot of things which are a lot more dangerous. Which, you know, those should be the things we're talking about. You know, we should, instead of having like people getting stuck in quicksand, we should have people getting stuck in grain silos, and you know, people would like take it seriously. There's also a thing of like change in pressures, like underwater. There's like some very famous, not famous, viral videos, probably the word to use about like stories of divers and changes in. I was saying changes in I was going to say changes in pH, but that's not right. It's what is the symbol for pressure? I can't remember. There's like a terminology they use of like changes in pressure, and it's like, whoa, that's actually dangerous, like it's super dangerous. Anyway, I'm not a deep sea diver, or well, any sort of diver, so I guess I don't really need to worry about it. Nor am I a farmer, so the likelihood of me running into these situations are quite small. So, you know, it's a bit esoteric. But anyway, I don't know, quicksand, too overrated as a danger. But on that note, I'm going to round off this episode here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscriptions, shares are greatly appreciated. Discord and Twitter down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.